And my next question, Jason, is evident that the majority of people worldwide do not associate the mind with the body, nor the body with the mind. Even some of the strongest, even some of the smartest people we give praise to in many fields, for example, eat garbage instead of real food, do little or no exercise, and have a level of physical intelligence that is very behind their intellectual intelligence. Sadly, this is also the case in both religious and so-called spiritual communities worldwide. I'd love to hear your thoughts regarding the mind as body and the body as the mind, and anything else you'd like to share in this regard, and why these essential facts are essential facts we need to be aware of and be diligent and responsive to, particularly if you're a parent.
Well, I think as my parents had listened to all my talks and are horrified when I'm about to document what I'm about to document right now. But the body and the mind, for me, I'm still, on the trail of understanding exactly what's going on between the body and the mind. They're definitely linked. I know through personal experience that when I used to do alcohol and cocaine, I could feel a dark entity come through my feet and enter my body and take over my personality.
That's pretty wild. Yeah, I've heard a lot of that, and I've had to rehab lots of people with exactly that kind of story.
And so there's a good ending to the story, but whatever that was, it would basically be overly sexual, overly violent, irrational, wouldn't consider long-term consequences of my actions. It was almost like something was driving me around. And when I would apply the Chek principles, I would have the opposite effect. I would be more moral, more ethical, more about the we instead of the me. I would be considerate of others. I would be patient with others. So the body and the mind are one, but I think a lot of people really underestimate how they're connected and how the way out of these problems are connected to the food that we choose to put inside ourselves and the media and the water. And it should be obvious at this point that there is a connection, obviously, between the body and the mind, because why else are they poisoning our food? Why else are they throwing all this, lower chakra, negative vibration, negative frequency at us through things like Netflix? Like, there's a lot more going on than meets the eye. And to me, I'm just thankful each and every day that you taught me how to eat well so I could just start to understand what it was like to be a normal human being.
Well,
that was very important lesson that you taught me.
Are you confused about your life's purpose or wondering why you're really here? Don't feel alone. It's pretty common today. Guess what? You can join my Spirit Gym community, have access to my Master Key lessons, and get my support and guidance and the support of our awesome community to find your life's purpose and do all the inner work necessary to really resolve unresolved challenges, heal, grow, and identify exactly why you're here and what gems you came to give the world. If you want to join us, you're welcome to join my Spirit Gym community.
Yes, well, I will elaborate a little bit on the body-mind connection. First of all, most people don't know this, but embryologically, your skin actually emerges from the tissue that is your brain. So your body is actually wrapped in brain tissue. Your skin is the sensory pole of the brain. You can talk to any brain surgeon. Once you open the skull, you could actually scoop a person's brain out and feed it to them. They won't feel a damn thing. There are no sensory neurons in the brain. The skin, or the surface of the body, is how the brain senses the environment. So that's a key thing. The other thing is, if you look at the work of Fritz Albert Popp and many scientific studies on photon emission, the body actually has another network that's much faster than the nervous system, and it's a photon emission communication system. And every single cell in our body produces photons, and the cells are talking to each other through photon emission. And photons, based on scientific research, have an almost infinite capacity to carry information. So we have a network of light communication that actually supersedes the brain, that is a global network between every single cell in our body. And one of the ways they've identified this, which is quite interesting, if you're not familiar with this, I might have mentioned it on the podcast before, but it's worth repeating. You know how you can, for example, film with high-speed film a golfer swinging a golf club and hitting a golf ball? Well, when you look at the conduction velocity from the time the golfer thinks swing the club till the time the club impacts the ball, the speed, it's about 350 milliseconds for the impulse to get from the brain to the muscles and accelerate the club, but it takes just as long for any feedback information to get up to the brain. So it actually takes 3/4 of a second to a second for your brain to send the impulse to swing the club. So by the time you are aware that your hand is out of place or that your foot's out of place, I mean, anybody that's swung a golf club knows they can tell when they're going to have a shitty shot before the club even hits the ball, but they can't do anything about it. So what happens is it turns out that the feedback loop is too slow. If we're doing any kind of activity, we're moving faster than about 3/4 of a second to complete the movement, which is almost any sport. A pitcher throwing a ball, you throwing a baseball from outfield to the infield, swinging a hockey stick, throwing a punch in boxing or a kick, trying to defend yourself. So we have physiological studies, and have had for a very, very long time, that show us the rate of conduction of the nervous system. So here's where it gets interesting. Somebody was doing high-speed film work on concert pianists, and they became aware of something. They said, wait a minute, these pianists are moving their fingers so fast and hitting notes far faster than the brain could actually possibly conduct that information, because they're changing finger positions and covering the keyboard at a rate that's faster than the brain can actually process information and know which keys to hit in the right order. So what they found, sure enough, that the body's doing it through light transmission, and that they're actually using the biophoton system in order to communicate. So what I'm saying is that the brain, what is the brain? It's a collection of neurons with connections to every single part of your body. Otherwise, how would you know when your stomach was full, or when you had to go poop, or when you were in pain, or where your arm was at in space? So the brain is actually really a collection of all the nerve centers from the entire body that come into an organizational process, so that there's a way for us to actually coordinate all aspects of the body into one working whole. And the unconscious mind processes information in parallel, which means it can process multiple inputs at the same time. But the conscious mind only processes information in series, which means one thought at a time. Now, it's interesting, as a side note, there's a lot of people that think that they're effective multitaskers, and even men who think they can multitask better than women, but they don't realize women have 30% more commissurial fibers connecting the left and right brain hemispheres. So to put that kind of in layman's terms, if you increase the processing power and speed of your laptop by 30%, you would notice a big difference. That's why I say it's not a good idea to lie to a woman or try to pretend you're not having sex, because her nose is better than yours, her eyes is better than yours, and she can process a lot more information. But there was a thought I was trying to get out there. It was about, I lost my train of thought, but I threw the side note on the women in there. But I think the key point that I'm trying to drive at is that you cannot separate the body from the brain, because it's one system. And the brain has got one primary relationship, that's with the body. And at the core of our survival instincts is, am I safe? What can I eat? And then you think about procreation in that order. Those are called the reptilian reflexes, based on 25 years of research by a neuroscientist named Paul MacLean. He's the one that created the concept of the triune brain. But we can go one step deeper. And are you familiar with the work of Dr. Daniel Siegel, MD, a psychiatrist that's done tremendous work on the mind?
No, I don't think so.
Well, you got to check him out. Daniel Siegel, MD. He's a psychiatrist, and he made the point that after traveling all over the world to psychiatry conferences and asking, could someone please define what the mind is, nobody could do it in psychology or psychiatry conferences. And he thought this was just a mind-bending reality, that we have psychiatrists and psychologists, none of which know what a mind is. So he got a team of 40 experts together that he thought were intelligent enough to make a good contribution to come up with a definition of the mind. I think he said it took 4 years for them to finally come to a working definition that they all agreed on. And here's what it is: mind, an embodied and relational process that regulates the flow of energy and information. So what's the first two words? An embodied process. There you go. Your mind is an embodied process that regulates the flow of energy and information, which, by the way, is what spirit is. So an embodied process regulates the flow of energy and information. So that's what a mind does, but it's an embodied and relational process. So the brain has to have a relationship with the rest of itself, or it doesn't have anything to regulate, and there's nowhere to send and receive information. And you have to have 2 points of sentience to create a mind. Otherwise, you've just got an information processor like a computer, but a computer doesn't know anything, has no awareness of what you're processing with it. You could be writing a letter that says, I'm about to destroy this computer, and it wouldn't know the difference. But a mind, in the functional sense of the term, is 2 points of sentience that are sharing energy and information, because that's how we actually progressively gain awareness of not only ourself, but our environment. And you cannot know yourself without relationships. For example, they've looked at, there's a number of case histories out there you may be familiar with, but children that somehow got separated from tribes or people and lost in the woods. And some of them, I think there's at least 6 cases of infants that were raised by wolves. Wow. And there's a case or 2 of chimpanzees adopting an infant and raising it. But when they found these kids and tried to figure out, what their psychological aptitude was, they found that they were only animals. They did not have any mental capacity beyond just pure animal survival instincts and that of the animals that raised them. And so what they learned is that we have to be raised by people that have more knowledge than us, and we have to be raised in a relational environment where we actually can learn who we are through feedback from other people. Because if we don't have, for example, parents to say, use the toilet, then we will just shit on the floor. And if we don't have somebody teaching us what is socially acceptable or unacceptable, then we're just instinctually driven, and we'll be just like an animal. So you see that the mind is not actually just in the body, it's in our relationships. And current research shows that the mind is not even in the brain. It's in a field. The mind is actually a field of action. A field in physics means a place of action. So it turns out that the mind is actually a non-local reality, and that our brain is actually ascending and receiving. It's a biological two-way radio that's in contact with a field. And one of the reasons this was investigated, which I'll share with you and the others because it's quite interesting, the world's most powerful computer up till fairly recently was the Cray supercomputer, and its hard drive was made of water. Yeah. But scientists could not figure out how in the world water molecules could store this massive amount of information. So they started doing some very advanced level research. The United States Air Force did some of this research. Actually, Greg Braden talked about this in one of his programs, and I've looked into it as well. But what they did is they did very advanced research to find out how water is storing this information, but they found the water's not storing the information. The water's interacting with a field.
Wow, like a cloud.
Like a cloud, except it's a non-local field. And remember, information does not have mass, so you don't need when we store information on a hard drive, it's only because of the format we're storing it in. But when you're storing a symbol, like if I asked you right now, how much space does your knowledge take up in your head? Well, where is it? In fact, there's studies by Karl Pribram and others. They tried to find out where information is in the brain. I don't know if you know about this study. This one's pretty cool. But Karl Pribram's a famous brain scientist, and he talks about this in one of his books. But what they did is they took rats, they taught them how to get through a maze. And then what they do...
Yeah, they took his brain out, right?
Well,
they took the brains out.
Well, what they did is they opened the skull, and they started taking small sections of the brain out, and then they would let the rat run the maze. And then they take more out. Well, they got to the point where there was almost nothing left, and somehow the rat could still run the maze.
Yeah, because the brain's outside.
The brain's sitting on the petri dish, on the surgeon's tray. And so, that led them to realize, and this is how we got the holographic brain theory. So what the point I'm making is the mind is not in the brain. The brain's interfacing with the mind. And in alchemy, they taught us thousands of years ago, if you study alchemy like I have, that the vibration that mind is at is called the air element. And in alchemy, the earth, water, fire, and air are not actually just elements. They're ranges of vibration. So the alchemist showed us that the fire element is related to the source of which what some would call God, or the source that is dreaming itself into existence and is the, shall we say, the urge to create that source energy has. So fire represents the desire to create. Air represents the frequency of mind, where you have the flow of energy and information between any two points of sentience. Now, that could be two cells. That can be two amoeba. It can be two octopus. It can be any two nervous systems that can process energy and information. So, what I'm really pointing to, and what I wanted to dialogue with you on for people's own understanding, if your body is healthy, remember your brain is fed by your blood, but your blood is fed by your digestive system and your liver. So you have to, whatever you bring in, you have to digest, metabolize, and assimilate and eliminate. And if you don't eliminate the toxins out of your body, it'll poison your whole body, including your brain. So you cannot in any way, shape, or form separate the brain from the body. And without a healthy body, you cannot have a healthy brain. If you don't have healthy blood, you can't have a healthy brain. And if you don't have a healthy brain, you won't make healthy choices. And the more debilitated your body is and the brain is, the less capability you have for interfacing with that non-local field, because the brain turns out to be a quantum supercomputer.